How it is, guys and gals? It's your boy Liam 2020, and yeah, I'm talking about Pirates of the Caribbean, which even though I got it a long time ago, I mean, ever since 2019, because I didn't announce anything at D23 Expo, but yeah, this is basically I'm going to explain why Pirates of the Caribbean Dead Man's Chest is the best one. And it was my number one favorite. I actually rank these a while back, and obviously Pirates 2 was at number one. Like, yes, I still have the film right here. I just keep it in a guest bedroom or where my niece sleeps. And before I watched the films, I also played the Lego Pirates of the Caribbean video game, which I have here on the Wii. I also picked up the PS3 version a little while later, but yeah. Anyway, let's get into this. Sorry, so the contractors are here, and I have my do not disturb sign up. No one walks in, but they might have to get access to they have to shut my water off. If that does happen, I'll just stop recording briefly and let them in. But anyway, it starts at Port Royal, where Elizabeth Swann, played by Keira Knightley, is going to get married. Supposed to be getting married to Will Turner, played by Orlando Bloom. When Lord Cutler Beckett of the East India Trading Company, played by Tom Hollander, and it's a completely different guy than Tom Holland, who's going to do Nathan Drake in the upcoming Uncharted film. They're not the same guy. Which then they arrive, and actually, I don't think Will was in handcuffs, because in the game he was. Yeah, I'm going to be comparing the movie to the game a lot, because obviously, like I just said, I played the Lego Pirates of the Caribbean game before I watched the films, so I was kind of like a little disappointed when some of the stuff I saw in the game didn't make its way into the movie. But then Will arrives, and they're both arrested. Beckett has 2 permits, and also Governor Swan, played by Jonathan Pryce, I think I say his name. He has 3 arrest warrants. One is for Elizabeth, because he thinks it's the one for Will, but it's actually one for Elizabeth. And then he pulls out another one. He's like, here's the one for Will. And they also use the cliche of bad luck for the groom to see the bride before the wedding, which this came out 3 years before Monsters vs. Aliens, another film that used that cliche. Also, Beckett's 3rd arrest warrant is for James Norrington, who was actually Commodore back in Pirates 1, but apparently he resigned after a hurricane destroyed his ship sometime between the events of Pirates 1 and this film. Which Governor Swan states, and Beckett's like, that's not the answer to the question I was asking. How is that not a clear, no, he is not present at the moment? That's just what I wondered. So then we see Mr. Gibbs, played by Kevin McNally, on the Black Pearl, who's sailing toward a Turkish prison where a bunch of crows fly in, pick up some of the prisoners going in, and then we see people throwing them into a coffin. This scene wasn't in the game, but it was in the movie. It's like, oh wow, new scene. And it turns out one crow's picking at a coffin when Jack Sparrow, played by Johnny Depp, shoots the coffin and the bird. And then he grabs a leg, rows back to the Pearl, where Gibbs helps him on board, and then Jack the monkey from the previous film actually shows up, and then he shows his crew the drawing of a key he found, and they decide, let's go after this key and whatever it unlocks. Which then, a bit later, Jack's doing some work aboard the Pearl when he realizes that his rum bottle is empty. He's like, why is the rum always gone? He heads down to the lower deck, and then we see Bootstrap Bill Turner, who was mentioned in Pirates 1, but he doesn't make an actual appearance in that film. He was part of Jack's crew that Hector Barbosa, played by Jeffrey Rush, but he only appears in one scene in this film, which I have the figures of. I have Jack right here for Disney Infinity. Figure of Jack, and I also have Barbosa right here. I have Davy Jones, but he's displayed over there with the others. I have to make sure you can see that. Yeah. As for Disney Infinity, unfortunately, they did not make a figure of video from Tinkerbell. If they did, I would have picked that up, displayed it with those. But yeah. The way Bootstrap tells Jack about what happened after they marooned him on the island, which was explained back in Pirates 1. And this scene wasn't in the Lego game either. But it had some nice suspense to it and actually kind of explained why Davy was going after Jack. It's like, oh, so that's why. I like this film a lot. So then back at Port Royal, we also... So Will is then talking with Beckett, who basically offers him a deal. Bring the compass. Bring Jack's compass back to me. So then Will heads to Tortuga, asks some people if they've seen Jack, which they haven't. And then he finally heads to an island, heads to the island Pelagosto, which there's cannibals on the island. The Pelagostos are cannibals. However, the person rowing the boat is too scared, so Will actually jumps out of the boat and swims towards the island where the Black Pearl is completely beached. It's there because Bootstrap gave Jack the black spot. So then, also in the game, when Will jumped in the water, the pirate in the boat rowed away as fast as he could. So then Will goes walking in the woods and discovers a skeleton. Well, in the game he discovered a skeleton, but in the movie he was caught and hung by a rope and tied to a stick and was introduced to Jack sitting on the throne. In the game, Jack was already tied to a pole above a fire, and then he escaped when no one was looking. Will tries to explain what happened, saying like that they were captured for trying to help him, and unfortunately Jack is unable to speak English for this one moment only. Which, I don't speak Pelagosto, so I have no idea what Jack was saying to them, but it probably wasn't good. So then they throw Will into a bone cage along with Gibbs and all of Jack's other crew members. Which also, in the game, Will and Gibbs were the only ones there and they were in separate cages. However, in the movie, Will and Gibbs are in the same cage. They're accompanied along with Marty and Cotton in their cage, plus 2 other crew members. So then they're hanging there, and also, so then they eventually decide to start swinging to get out of the ravine. And also Jack does try to escape briefly, and he puts spices under his armpits like deodorant. That was kind of funny. Also, the paprika says East India Trading Company on it, which is kind of funny. It's like, why would the Pelagostos even have that? And then we see Will just climbing up the wall. And he says they'll take everyone to man the Black Pearl. However, one of the guys in the other cage, Leech, says only 6 people would do, and he realizes he fucked up and they start climbing a race. Also, while they're in the bone cages, we see Elizabeth Nagin with Beckett after Governor Swan takes her out of prison and decides to sail her away, but then Governor Swan's associate is killed by Beckett's partner in crime, Mercer, played by David Schofield. I think that's how you say his name. Then Elizabeth confronts Beckett about the compass, which this scene wasn't in the game either. And then that's when we see Pintel and Ragetti rowing towards the island, which Pintel and Ragetti were kind of funny. They didn't come back in Pirates 4 or 5, sadly, but they somehow managed to get out of prison. I gotta check to see some of the books in between films that explains how they got out. And then at Barbossa's, other crew members from Pirates 1 came back in this film aside from them. But then they see the Black Pearl, they row to the island, and then start getting Pearl ready. But back to Will in the bone cage. They're climbing when a bridge native is crossing the bridge. And then Leech tries to sneak off, but he grabs a snake, and everyone in his cage falls in the ravine to their deaths. So then Will decides, let's just get out of here, after they get spotted. The bridge native warns them, and they set the pit on fire while Jack is being chased. After he gets off, And people even throw food on a stick while Will and Gibbs start running in the bone cage after they finally get to the top. It's so funny. Jack tries to throw a coconut, but it doesn't work, and he falls off the edge of a cliff. Will also falls off a cliff, and their bone cage snaps. There's also a deleted scene where one of the guys gets killed, but that didn't make its way to the final version of the film. There's a lot of deleted scenes that I wonder, why didn't they put this in the final version of the movie? So then they swim to safety, and Jack actually survives the fall because his pole got caught, but then it slips and he falls down through a bunch of bridges and even survives the ground. So then Will, Gibbs, Marty, and Cotton eventually run to the Pearl, and which surprisingly Pintail and Ragetti managed to get it done by themselves. And then, see, in the game Jack was with them, but this time he actually took a little while to catch up. And then they get on the ship with the Pelagostos chasing Jack. And then also the prison dog was there too. The Pelagostos proceed to chase the dog. That's actually kind of funny. So then after they're far away from the Pelagostos Island, that's when Jack the Monkey also stole Ragetti's wooden eye, but then he gets it back, and then Jack pulls out the key drawing and says, "Alright, well, if you help me find this key, and whatever it goes to, I will free you and Elizabeth." And then they decide to go see Tia Dalma, played by Naomi Harris. Which, while they're going in the swamp, Gibbs is telling everyone about a creature known as the Kraken, which is like, okay, that's nice instead of the big crocodile. I wasn't expecting the crocodile boss fight we got in this game, but yeah. Actually, it's nice to have some lore about the Kraken. And there was also a funny scene where Jack the Monkey gets out of the cage and then Jack shoots the rowboat to get him back in, and then it's like, great, we're stuck here. But then after a while, they eventually reach Tia Dalma's shack, or whatever it is. And then so then they start to talk, and Will shows her the drawing of the key. And then Tia Dalma starts explaining Davy Jones's backstory. Saying, oh yeah, so Davy fell in love with a woman, even though Gibbs is like, no, it was the sea that he fell in love with. But they actually covered this more in Pirates 3, more than in Pirates 2, but apparently Davy agreed that he would sell seas for 10 years, which Calypso agreed. Calypso is Tia Dalma, by the way. They revealed this in 3. He says, sure, I'll sail the seas for 10 years, help everyone who dies get across. He does it, and then once the 10 years are up, he goes ashore. She's not there, and that's what causes him to... Yep, it was revealed that he cut his own heart out, cut out his own heart, locked it in the chest, and then buried the chest so nobody would find it, and kept the key on him at all times. They're about to leave when Tia Dalma asks to see Jack's hand, which has the black spot on it, and everyone panics. The game also had Jack just trying to shoot the monkey, which was kind of funny. So then eventually, during a big thunderstorm, they head to a shipwreck. And Will decides, or no, actually Jack sent Will to the shipwreck to find the key. So Will heads there, while Jack puts out all the lanterns on the Black Pearl so they don't get spotted. Will boards the shipwreck and sees someone with a starfish on their face in the game, or in the movie's case, no face at all. And then the Flying Dutchman emerges from the water, and it's like, ooh, wow. And then all of Davy Jones's henchmen show up, and Will is easily defeated. He starts fighting with Clanker. One guy was named Clanker. But then Will's defeated, and then Davy Jones himself shows up and talks to Will and the other four guys on the ship, eventually asking them if they wanted to. Basically, what Davy would do with those guys is he would ask them whether or not they wanted to join his crew and serve 100 years aboard the Flying Dutchman, or kill them. And Will was neither, so then Will says, "Oh yeah, Jack Sparrow sent me to settle his debt." And Jack is spying on them with an eyeglass, and then Davy teleports right in front of him. It's like, what? It's like, oh. So then Davy decides, okay. It's like, alright, Jack Sparrow, you have to give me 100 souls in 3 days. But then luckily he's actually reasonable and keeps Will as a head start, and that only leaves Jack 99 more souls to go, which was somewhat reasonable. Davy Jones is such a great Pirates of the Caribbean villain. He's better than all the other Pirates villains, and he's one of my 3 favorite villains of all time. Disney-wise. Or even, like, non-Disney villains I'm trying to figure out how to rank. Because basically, even Pixar movies, I have animated movie villain, or even live-action villains. But so basically it goes, obviously, Vidya from Tinkerbell is number 1. I've known her longer than most of them. The lizard guy from Monsters, Inc., Randall Boggs, he's number 2, and Davy Jones is at number 3. That's basically my ranking of my movie villains. But anyways, back to the film. Davy leaves and Jack decides to head to Tortuga. On the Dutchman, there's even some more scenes of Governor Swan talking with Beckett. And we got a really awesome scene of Davy Jones playing the piano with his, or organ with his tentacles. Pretty savage. So then Will is working with the Dutchman crew when he runs into his father, and it's like, oh shit, you're my long lost father. You're my long lost son. The game, they actually mirrored each other. In the movie, it just causes a big mess, and then when the boatswain of the Dutchman, Jimmy Legs, tries to whip Will in the back, Bootstrap doesn't want Legs doing it, so he decides to do it himself after Davy comes out and tells him 5 lashes. Beode. Which then they dump Will and Bootstrap onto the lower deck, and then Bootstrap begins explaining, and then the oldest member of the Dutchman crew, Wyvern, played by John Boswell, literally merged with the fucking wall of the ship. That's what happens after 100 years. They merge with the ship themselves. Aside from getting all, like, the fish barnacles on them and all that. Which also, back in Tortuga, Jack's supplying a crew for people to join and ferry them. I think he was supposed to give them to Davy, but then that's when Norrington shows up and a crazy ass bar fight breaks out. It was actually kind of hilarious. And then they throw Norrington into a mud pit. Which after that's over, Elizabeth was also in Tortuga as well after she stowed away on an Edinburgh trader and then told them that Tortuga was the only safest place, so they headed there. And that's how she ended up in Tortuga. She catches up with Jack, and obviously Norrington follows them. And they get on the Pearl and start sailing. After the chest. Back on the Dutchman. Will is looking over a game of Liar's Dice, which I actually played this game myself with a friend, and it's actually pretty fun. It's even in Red Dead Redemption. There was a deleted scene where it was even an extended game where basically it was just a 2-player match with Will and Davy after Will challenged him. This scene was cut from the film. Will said, If you win, I will serve 100 years aboard the Dutchman. If I win, you will free my father. Which, Will won that game. After only one fucking round, they even bothered to take away all the fucking die. So then they decide to have a second game, which Bootstrap joins in and says, If I lose, I will serve an eternity on the Dutchman. And Will even says that if he wins, he'll get the key, the chest, which Davy ends up showing. Obviously, Davy ends up winning. And Will decides, I'm going to steal that key. There was even a scene in the game where Davy kicked a die at Makis' face. Makis is the shark guy and also first mate of the Flying Dutchman. So then Will sneaks into the cabin, steals the key, and replaces it with, in the game it was a banana, in the movie it was the drawing that he brought with him. So then Will escapes the Dutchman, and comes across the Edinburgh trader, which then we cut back to Jack, who, there's a deleted scene where he's having more, where he and Gibbs find some letters from Will saying that he was working with Beckett the whole time. Will never told Jack that that Beckett was involved. Which then, back to Will and the Edinburgh trader, they spot the Dutchman, which then we see Davy holding the drawing of the key in his squid hand, which then he just folds it. And there's a deleted scene where he says, "Your son was fortunate enough to find a ship, and yet not so fortunate enough as to find land." Damn, that's pretty savage. So Davy probably just throws the drawing of the key away, because, well, after that, the drawing was never shown again. And then he summons the Kraken to destroy the Edinburgh trader, which it does, but Will survives. Even though a few of the Edinburgh trader members survived, they were brought on the Dutchman and killed. And Will hides on the Dutchman, while Davy decides, you know what, I'm going to Isla Cruces to get back the chest. And tells the pufferfish guy, Kalinico, to try to get him there first, and Kalinico's even like, first? So then they begin heading to Isla Cruces, and also Elizabeth's wedding dress was on the Edinburgh trader and sank to the bottom of the ocean. Which then we see Jack and Elizabeth talking with each other on the Pearl, until they eventually reach Isla Cruces, which Norrington, Elizabeth, Jack, Pintel, and Rigetti all go ashore. And then Davy sees this and is like, shit, I can't step foot on land because it hasn't been 10 years yet. So then Makis decides, how about we go to Isla Cruces instead of you and do it? Because Davy's crew members could step on land whenever they want, unlike Davy himself, who could only do it every 10 years. So then Dutchman goes down underwater, which, yes, the Dutchman can go up and down in the water. So then first Will catches up to Jack and Elizabeth on the island after they find the chest, which there was a deleted scene where Elizabeth explained the history of the island to Norrington. And also the game gave us a crab boss fight. It's like, probably won't see that in the movie. I actually would have liked to see that deleted scene with Elizabeth explaining the history of Isla Cruces to Norrington. So then they head to the island, and I'm just going to pull it up. Apparently, they were... So then when Will finds a chest, it turns into a three-way fight between him, Jack, and Norrington, because they want to use the heart for themselves, because obviously Will wants to stab the heart so that way he can free his father from the Dutchman. Jack wants to use Davy's heart to call off the Kraken, which the black spot came back when he was talking with Elizabeth on the Pearl. And Norrington wants to give the heart to Beckett so that way he can become a Navy officer again. Turns into a three-way sword fight, which Will ends up stealing Elizabeth's sword as opposed to using his own one like he did here in the game. And of course, Elizabeth is just pissed that Jack, Will, and Norrington are acting like total cunts. And Pintel and Rigetti are even trying to figure out, what the hell is going on here? What does he want? It's like, no, I think he wants a chest, so yeah. That was actually kind of funny with Pintel and Rigetti trying to figure out what the fuck was going on. But yet they still continue fighting. So eventually, they all go to Isla Cruces. Well, Davy Jones's crew members, which, led by Macus, according to the Pirates of the Caribbean wiki here, he takes Hadris, Clanker, Crash, Greenbeard, Jimmy Legs, Kalinico, Palifiso, Old Hattie, Quiddance, and Wheelback. Oh. Which is a little odd, because in the game, at the end of the Isla Cruces level, in this game, it has you fight Crash, Jimmy Legs, and Macus, along with Brune Jongen, who was a member of the Dutchman crew, but he was one of the few guys that only appeared in Pirates 3, and Angler was was the other guy, but apparently in the movie, he did not go to Isla Cruces. He stayed on the Dutchman. And obviously, Bootstrap Bill was thrown in the brig after the Kraken attack on the Edinburgh trader. So then, Macus and the other Dutchman pirates head to the island, see the chest is missing, and then they hear the bell ring over at the tower, because of course Jack, Will, and Norrington are still fighting. But then Jack eventually manages to grab the key from Will and Norrington, who are still dueling. And also, Pintel and Ragetti steal the chest for themselves, with Elizabeth chasing them after. In the game, was because they saw Hadris, Kalinico, and Crash show up, but in the movie, they just stole it because they wanted that chest, and Elizabeth started chasing them. Which, then they eventually. So then, after Jack grabs the key, he runs off. In the game, he rode a pig, but in the movie, he just went through it on foot. So then, Will and Norrington jump onto a wheel, which literally breaks loose and starts rolling down the... and Jack gets stuck in the wheel. Elizabeth confronts Pintel and Ragetti, but realizes her sword's missing because Will stole it. Again, why didn't Will just use his own sword as opposed to stealing Elizabeth's? But then... they're just like, hello, Poppet. They also called her Poppet in Pirates 1 when they captured her. But then Macus and the other Dutchman pirates catch up, and it turns into a big fight with them. Jack gets back in the wheel, and they start fighting. After Jack gets out... See, well, during the fight, Hadris grabbed... You don't remember which one Hadris was? He has this weird shell on his head. He grabs the chest, he tries to run back to the Dutchman. Jack notices this. This is in the movie. In the movie, he grabs a coconut, throws it at Hadris, which knocks his head off. Yes, his head could be detached from his body. And then, in the game, they were still on the beach when the wheel showed up, just ran everyone over. Hadris was one of the 5, along with Macus, Kalinico, Clanker, Angler, and Crash. Well, Elizabeth got stuck on the wheel too, but Pintel and Ragetti jumped out of the way. And that's what caused Hadris' head to come off. But both game and movie, both obviously this is in this game, both obviously Jack opens the chest, sees Davy's heart. And here's one part that I saw in the game that was not in the movie. After Jack takes Davy's heart out of the chest, he sees Hadris' detached head, puts that in the chest, and closes it. That was only in the game. In the movie, he does not put Hadris' head in the chest. And that actually would have been kind of... I actually would have laughed if that were in the movie. So then Jack immediately runs to the beach after Pintel and Ragetti re-grab the chest. Also, Tia Dalma gave Jack a jar of dirt. He puts the heart in there, but then Kalinico ambushes him. And, they continue fighting there on the island. Which then the rest of the Dutchman pirates reach the beach. And also in the Isla Cruces level in the game, which surprising is that with the extra toggle cheat turned on, another Dutchman pirate playable level was Jelly, another character who did not come until Pirates 3. Why did they choose him over Wheelback? Because Wheelback actually did go to Isla Cruces in the film. But anyway, they're on the beach. They're all fighting. And then the wheel runs over everyone, which, by the way, Will and Norrington are still in the wheel. And it turns into a big brawl, which... Then they eventually decide to escape while Norrington steals Davey's heart from the jar of dirt and takes the chest to lure everyone away. And Jack uses this as an escape opportunity. But then Norrington is confronted by Hadris in the woods after he trips and gives him the chest and runs off. And then they all head back to the Dutchman. Which also Hadris has crab legs at the back of his head, which he just follows them from a distance. Honestly, it would have been funnier if they just did the game thing where they put Hadris' head in the chest, but it's still my favorite Pirates of the Caribbean when I was so into it. And also in the game, they just replaced it with, they replaced a jar of dirt with a teapot, and when Norrington tripped, he threw a chest backwards and it landed on Kaleniko's head. Or another thing they could have done with here in the movie is he could have had it where when Norrington trips, the chest goes flying, lands on Hadris' missing head socket. That actually could have potentially worked as well, but whatevs. It is what it is. So then when they're on the Pearl, the Dutchman rises out of the water, and Jack begins taunting Davey with the jar of dirt. Unbeknownst to him that his heart is not actually in there. He falls on the stairs. And apparently this scene was totally improvised. Like, Johnny Depp totally improvised himself. He's like, I got a jar of dirt. I got a jar of dirt. And guess what's inside it? But Davey's annoyed. And they start shooting at them. But then eventually the Pearl manages to outsail the Dutchman. And then Davey summons the Kraken and destroy the Pearl. In the game, he just, whistled, can't really do that. But in the movie, he had a Kraken hammer. And then Will eventually realizes that it's the Kraken attacking the Pearl, because obviously he witnessed the Kraken destroy the Edinburgh trader earlier in the film. And also the jar of dirt ends up breaking, and Jack is scared when he sees that Davey's heart is not in there. He's like, where'd it go? I put the heart in here! And of course, he doesn't know is that Norrington took it. The Kraken decides to slowly attack, but then Will manages to fend it off, and Jack steals a rowboat. The last rowboat, because the Kraken destroyed, half all the rowboats except for that one. They start loading up gunpowder and rum. Elizabeth notices that Jack slipped out. And the Kraken is so aggressive, literally killing everyone aboard the Pearl. And Jack takes out his compass and decides, you know what, fuck it, I'm going back to the Pearl. And also, Elizabeth was tasked with shooting the barrels, but before she could shoot it, the Kraken ends up grabbing her leg, but luckily Pintel and Rigetti end up chopping that tentacle clean off. One of the other pirates tries to shoot it, but then he gets grabbed by the Kraken. And then Jack shows up just in time with the musket. He grabs it, shoots the barrels, the Kraken goes in the water. Also in the game, it had Elizabeth stay. This was one of the few changes that were made to make the game more co-op friendly, and they help fight the Kraken together. Instead, what Elizabeth did was she handcuffs Jack to the mast of the Pearl, while Will gets everyone else onto a rowboat, and Elizabeth eventually joins them. Which Jack breaks himself free, but then that's when the Kraken shows up and it eats him. And takes the Pearl down too. The game had Will getting knocked out. And only Will and Gibbs were in the boat. It was like, where the hell are Marty and Cotton? Oh, and also Pintel and Rigetti. It also had the Kraken grabbing Elizabeth and throwing her into the boat with Will and Gibbs. And Jack's hat landed clean on his head. In the movie, the hat fell in the water and drifted to another boat that got destroyed by the Kraken. In the game, Davey grabbed it and then also had Jack flipping his telescope around so that way it could teleport Davey further away. But anyway, after the Pearl gets taken down, Davey's like, okay, Jack's gone. And then he decides to check the chest to make sure his heart got aboard safely, which it obviously didn't. So then he opens the empty chest and is pissed. Or in the game where he sees Hadris' head in there instead of his heart. This would have made me laugh so hard if his head was in there. It made me laugh in the game. Why couldn't they use that in the movie? And then it has Hadris' body. They probably would have noticed that. I was like, where's his head? And then Hadrus's body grabs his head, pulls it out of the chest. And then we cut back to Beckett, which an East India Company ship found Norrington. That's how he got off Isla Cruces. And he has Davey's heart wrapped up in a cloth, which then he gets his sword back that Will made for him in the first movie. He tries to stab the heart. That was in the deleted scene. And then there's also has the Dutchman sailing to Port Royal. This pretty much starts to set up the events of 3. Everyone heads back to Tia Dalma's shack to mourn Jack's death. But then it's like, if only we could bring him back. Tia Dalma says they could go to a big waterfall. And then that's when Barbossa shows up, who Tia Dalma resurrected. Jeffrey Rush wasn't even credited for this role either. And, yeah. That's basically the end of the film. Also, the after credits scene has the dog as the new chief of the Pelagostos. The dog is the chief of the Pelagostos. That was kind of funny. And yeah, that's basically it for this movie. Best film. The ending is a really good cliffhanger on how the events of 3 would be set up. So I guess it's a good thing they decided to shoot 2 and 3 back to back, which also all the Dauntless guys that were with Norrington in Pirates 1 did not come back in this film, so a lot of people assume that they died. However, Theodore Groves, along with Murdoch and Mulroy, they come back in Pirates 3, and Gillette, he comes back in Pirates 4. Apparently it was going to confirm how those guys survived, but that was canceled in a comic. Yeah. They should make a side story sometime that has this event and show how those guys survived. I'd love to see some Pirates of the Caribbean side stories. Not counting all the books. And yeah, this is why Pirates of the Caribbean Dead Man's Chest is my favorite film of the franchise. I've even watched some Pirates of the Caribbean. I've even been, in the Pirates of the Caribbean community. I was also talking on there. One of the people in that community said that 3 was their favorite, and actually they said that 3 was their favorite movie of all time. Although some people say that only Pirates 1 is the good one, but I actually like Pirates 2 better than Pirates 1. Obviously. 3 was just kind of yeah, I mean, 3 was still good. Honestly, I like 5 better than 3, actually. But yeah, that's basically it for this breakdown. And holy crap. I've been recording this for 38 minutes straight. I didn't know how long it was going to be. I tried to keep this as short as possible. Believe it or not, but yeah. So let me know, have you played this Pirates of the Caribbean game, and did you like it? And anything you saw in this game you wish should have been in the film, or any changes from the movies that you did not see in the game that you wish would have been in it. But because obviously when Jack jumps into the Kraken's mouth, he pulls out a toothbrush instead of his sword. That's another change that they made. Also, the after credit scene of the Pelagos was acting like fucking dogs. But yeah, that's basically it. Please like, sub, and peace. And stay tuned for Coco.